Trump administration struggles for path forward on nuclear talks as tensions with North Korea mount. President Trump's claims that reduced tensions with North Korea resulting from his personal diplomacy with Kim Jong-un demonstrated progress toward a nuclear deal were undercut Friday as Pyongyang lashed out at the administration's gangster-like tactics and blamed his top aides for the failed summit last month. In the latest sign of mounting hostilities since disarmament talks collapsed in Hanoi, a top North Korean official also declared that leader Kim Jong-un is weighing cutting off bilateral dialogue with the United States. The threat came amid Vice Foreign Minister Ko Sun-hui emphasized at a news conference in Pyongyang that the two leaders maintain a good relationship after the summit ended without a deal. And U.S. Secretary, yet behind the scenes, Trump aides have struggled to articulate a path to bridge the wide gaps between Washington's demands that the North fully dismantle its nuclear weapons program and Pyongyang's insistence that the United States ease punishing economic sanctions in exchange for incremental steps. In a private briefing in Washington this week, one White House official told foreign policy analysts that Trump's talks with Kim last month convinced the president that the regime is unwilling to surrender its nuclear program, said Sumi Terry, a Korea expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies who attended the briefing. What he was saying is that everybody knew North Korea would not give up its nukes, but Trump was not sure, she said. And, that realization throws into question Trump's strategy of abandoning the precedent of past U.S. administrations that rejected presidential-level talks, choosing instead to engage in direct negotiations with Kim without a clear roadmap for how a denuclearization process would work. Since their first, some foreign policy experts suggested that the sharp language from Ko was typical of Pyongyang's negotiating tactics and were aimed at winning leverage rather than scuttling talks. The vice minister, "The chemistry is mysteriously wonderful," Ko said of Kim and Trump's relationship. Bolton called Ko's characterization of the Hanoi talks inaccurate, while Pompeo noted that he had been after a trip he made to Pyongyang last July. A White House spokesman declined to comment. Kim's efforts to woo Trump, which have included sending him flattering personal letters, could have diminishing returns, given the failure in Hanoi. U.S. officials said the president's willingness to walk away without a deal would help empower the administration's negotiating team, led by Special Envoy Stephen Biegun, who has been frustrated in working-level meetings with his counterparts in Pyongyang. During at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Biegun emphasized that the administration would not lift sanctions until the North completely dismantled its nuclear program and ballistic missiles. Trump said this month that he would be very disappointed if the North followed through with a test underway to rebuild the Sahay rocket launch facility. At a news conference in Hanoi, Trump said several times that Kim had promised him that he would maintain the testing freeze, which the president has cited as evidence that his negotiations have made progress even though North Korea went through longer moratoriums during past U.S. administrations. As recently as Trump indicated that nuclear and missile testing really is a red line. He basically said, "A test certainly closes the book on diplomacy," Klingner added. I think the U.S., after returning from Hanoi, Trump aides sought to shore up political support, briefing lawmakers on Capitol Hill and other stakeholders and making the case that the president had showed his negotiating fortitude by holding a hard line on sanctions and being willing to walk away without a deal on his top foreign policy initiative. At one briefing, according to one person in the room who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the private meeting, Biegun told congressional staffers that the North Koreans were not creative in their thinking and did not appear to have a plan B after the United States rejected a proposal to lift most sanctions in return for the closure of some of the Yongbyon nuclear site, the country's main production site for fissile materials. Yet Biegun also took pains to emphasize that he had not assumed his job until last fall, well after the first Trump-Kim summit, which some lawmakers and staffers interpreted as a signal that he felt he had inherited a difficult portfolio and did not want to be blamed for the breakdown in talks. I honestly don't know what they do next. I think this has to, after the administration's outreach efforts, a bipartisan coalition of lawmakers for Trump's approach, affirming his decision to reject Pyongyang's offer in Hanoi. But former I worry this could all get worse before it gets better, said Victor Cha, who served as a high-ranking Asia policy official in the George W. Bush administration. There do not seem to
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.